All right, here we are, December 8th, the day after the day that was going to live in, which would live in infamy. Infamy. All right, anyway, here we are, Common Sense, Ohio, December 8th, 2023, bringing common sense to you at your ear steps. Mm-hmm. And at your, right in front of your eyes, too, if you check it out on YouTube, Facebook, Parler, wherever else we are. I guess we're all on video. Mm-hmm. You can check us out at commonsenseohioshow.com. Brought to you by Harper Plus Accounting, Harper Plus CPA. We are now sponsored. If you also want to be a sponsor, you can do that. And soon there'll be ways to support us in other fashions through monthly support. Just call it support. But yeah, we'll get right at it. But every week I've been doing this day in World War II history, and yesterday was December 7th, 1941, and I think it's a sad thing that lots of people don't even know what that date is. It's no longer living in infamy. But today, ironically, is the day that the speech that Roosevelt made the speech, the day that we live in infamy. This is when we declared war in 1941, December 8th. To quote his speech to the Congress, this is back when Congress still had to declare war.
Yeah, right.
When you would have to ask the Congress to declare war.
Duh, right.
To the Congress of the United States, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, the day which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and the solicitation of Japan was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. Indeed, 1 hour after Japanese air squadrons had commenced bombing in Oahu, the Japanese ambassador to the United States and his colleague delivered to the Secretary of State a formal reply to a recent American message. While this reply stated that it seemed useless to continue existing diplomatic negotiations, it contained no threat or hint of war or armed attack. It will be recorded that the distance of Hawaii and Japan make it obvious that the attack was deliberately planned many days or even weeks ago. During the intervening time, the Japanese government has deliberately sought to deceive the United States by false statements and expressions of hope for continued peace. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. Very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu, and it goes on for another couple pages. But really sort of an historic speech, and you can still watch it. You can pull it up on YouTube, and he's got that sort of 30s sounding, a day that will live in infamy, and there he was. And I think they actually propped him up for that when he was standing.
He was standing, and of course, he was a fireside chat president. Yeah. So Americans were comforted
and a socialist
by his voice. Well,
about that. No
question. I don't think Stalin ever did fireside chats. He did fireside shootings.
Slaughters.
But we had a nicer socialist, if you will. The thing is about that attack, if you take the identical scenario, almost the same number of people killed, surprise attack on 9/11, we now have people walking around, even in positions of some authority. I mean, they're into their 20s now that were not even born when 9/11 happened. Mm-hmm. And like you said at the beginning, Steve, people have forgotten in a lot of ways about December 7th, and they've also forgotten about September 11th.
Yeah, they have. And you would wonder how that happens. Like December 7th, it was. Again, I'm trying to put the timeline together and articulate this. And when I was growing up, so back in the mid-late 80s, I knew about December 7th.
Yeah.
And it was over 40 years before.
Sure, yeah.
And I knew about December, and I think even kids being born right then knew about December 7th because it was kept in our public purview, or we were taught about it. I don't think we're teaching about it much these days.
No, I think the textbooks in schools now, the World War II phase of a history course is just a few pages, like they blip right
barely
by
a chapter.
Yeah. Which is tragic.
It seems to be the history courses as well too in high school that it ends in World War II and we don't go beyond that. I mean, my son learned about Vietnam and Korea through a history of rock and roll class.
Wow.
Very interesting.
Wow, that's
And
crazy.
and it was really eye opening to see. He just grasped me because I've got history, rock and roll. Okay, whatever. I mean, it sounded like a good course, but then he said it really was based on the culture
Yeah.
of what was going on because how the music was influenced and the music influenced
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
whole
that's an
era. And he
interesting
learned
angle at learning
a
that history.
lot about history through that, through the music.
That's an interesting angle.
And he says, Dad, finally got to learn more about Vietnam and Korea. It's like, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I didn't learn any Vietnam history to speak of in high school.
And it's so important.
It's so
the
important.
history of the
It was
Vietnam.
too soon. You know, like
Yeah.
it's hard for me sometimes to get my head around the fact that in when we pull out 74 ish.
We were
I
just
think-
when we were in high school, we were just a decade out.
We were
of
a
Vietnam.
decade out. Like my football coach
Yes.
Yeah,
was
I
a
think
Vietnam veteran. you know.
Kissinger and Le Duc Tho, I think they worked out the Paris Accords and it was signed, and they both got Nobel Peace Prizes. Henry took his, Le Duc Tho didn't. I think it was in 75.
75. Okay. So I was 5 years old. It was still going on. And I think somehow it was just too much still. You know, it's like it wasn't history yet. I guess
Yeah,
maybe that's
right.
it. It wasn't history
It
yet.
was contemporary.
You know, I didn't learn it. And even in college, there was a Vietnam course and some people took it and I had any interest in it.
Yeah.
And I wish I would have taken it. I mean, later on, I've gone back and tried to learn it, but
America's longest war up to that time.
yeah.
Now we would say, you know, the Afghanistan war was our longest war.
But getting back to World War II, and you know, at the time, it's an interesting. There's so much cool history going on there, both politically, militarily, and socially. You know, we had Roosevelt was a socialist. He created a New Deal, and everybody thinks that busted us out of the Depression. Quite the contrary.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks that capitalism got us into the Depression. Quite the contrary.
Quite the contrary.
You know, there were deals going on with right before Roosevelt.
Hoover?
Yeah, Hoover.
Yeah.
You know, he was intervening quite a bit himself, trying to force auto manufacturers to cut deals with labor and do whatever. And it just sort of, it just created this swell that eventually collapses.
Right.
And, you know, the New Deal didn't bust us out of the Depression. It prolonged it in so many ways. I mean, you can go back and check the economics of it when things were implemented. But, you know, beyond that, you had people like the Nazis, you know, this little harmless group over in Germany, studying and working with Roosevelt and the Americans on things like eugenics.
Yeah.
That ultimately morphed into the final solution. And these are Americans were involved. Like there's correspondence going back and forth between the two governments talking about this sort of eugenics and developing the modern human and all this other nonsense.
FDR is well documented to have been a huge racist.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
Huge. I mean, he fought Eleanor when the Tuskegee Airmen were not getting deployed. Here we have aviators that we need in Europe, European theater of war. We got them trained up. They even based in Columbus for a while. The Tuskegee Airmen. So for those that don't know, that's an all African American fighter group that was put together because we had a manpower shortage, and you know the prejudice at that time was that blacks couldn't possibly operate.
Somehow they weren't capable of
weren't capable
so
of operating sophisticated equipment like an airplane. And it turned out that the Red Tails, the Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails as they were called, because the tails of the airplanes were painted red, had a distinguished record. But FDR refused to deploy them. You know, this was when we had an apartheid military.
Yep.
You know, like the cooks, the people doing the stuff way down below deck were black. The guys operating the anti-aircraft guns and the skippers and doing the more prestigious jobs were white.
Yep.
And in the Army you had black, you had Japanese, you had all these corps that were racially divided.
And all that sort of runs in parallel to Margaret Sanger and that whole movement of eugenics and. There's a Supreme Court case called Buck versus Bell, and I mean, that says one generation of imbeciles is enough. I mean, it's like there was a time when we really thought we could engineer humans to create the master race. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds so absurd to say that now, but like that's what they were trying to do. And these were racist, horrible people.
Oh, they
by
were.
today's standards.
Yeah.
By today's standards.
I
yeah.
absolutely totally agree. I was at Rickenbacker for a P-51 Mustang fly-in. This is probably 20, 25 years ago. And the Tuskegee Airmen were there. There were still a few that were alive that were there. It was totally an honor to meet those guys as well as all the other pilots. And you just crunch that a little bit. And when they got demilitarized and went back to places like Alabama or whatever, Chicago, north or south didn't matter. They went right back into this stratified racist society. Can you imagine the anger? Listen, I would have been a Black Panther if I grew up in those kinds of circumstances. I probably would have been a militant Black if I had been born African American into that standard of living where I go defend my country, lay my life on the line. General Patton had a group of Black tankers called Patton's Tigers, and they helped save Bastogne when the 101st Airborne were holed up there. But if you go to the history books and read about who relieved Bastogne in the Battle of the Bulge, you almost find nothing about these African American tankers. And you have to read special books to understand what their role was in some of these incidents. And it's a stain on our history that we don't not give them more attention than they deserve, any other group, but to give them equal attention. And it disturbs me to this day that the victors write the history and the prejudice inveigles itself into history in ways that are truly dishonorable to the memory of those guys.
Yep. And
they're absolute heroes.
It's just so funny how everything is, like everything is sort of tied back to that era. There was a young congressman, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was sort of FDR's darling in the New Deal, and later on when Johnson finally takes over after the Kennedy assassination, he sort of marshals in the Great Society that FDR couldn't marshal in because the war got in the way. And it was a disaster, of course. But,
and he was another racist.
Another just abject
LBJ
racist.
was
right, just a
horrible.
Yeah.
And the tape recordings that they have from him, at the time he's pushing civil rights, it exposes completely that it was a strategy.
Right? To
Right?
get votes for his Great Society, right?
The Great Society thing was a strategy to capture human beings that otherwise would be predisposed to be Republicans. So he was just going to buy them off. It was just a straight out, here's money from the federal government, and it came from Democrats. Even though we were the party 50 or 75 years ago that put on the little white hats and founded the Klan.
Yeah, the Dems.
Right? We're the same people, but now we're going to pay you to vote for us.
Yeah, they bought the votes.
That's all it was. And Lyndon's on tape.
It is, again, remarkable history there, all going back, of course, to December 8th. Not all of it going back. But December 8th was a day that lived. That was the date of the speech, I guess.
Yeah.
So anyway, with that, we can move on.
It's a heavy-duty day. And really just a final thought, if you guys don't mind. I think one of the biggest mistakes George Bush II made was not asking for a declaration of war. He asked for war powers of a kind, but not a declaration of war. And he should have asked for a declaration of war against Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. Somehow along the way, we have ordained the presidency with way too much power.
Yes.
The executive branch has taken way too much power. And in large part, that started with FDR, with all his New Deal and all these new administrative power. Actually, even before that, I guess, if you go back to Woodrow Wilson, who said, we don't need this democracy anymore. We're smart enough to run the country on our own. So he creates the administrative form of government. Roosevelt drives a truck through it, and then Johnson drives a tanker through it. It's like now we have. Then you fast forward a little bit. Reagan tried to back it off, But then along comes Obama, and here we are. We've just got this era where they just do it with their pen. So we have this president that signs orders and they get enforced.
Well, and the other thing that where I'm particularly trying to get to is, had FDR done what Bush did, he would have asked Congress to help him with a war on torpedoes. Because Bush called it a war on terror.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like, what are you talking about?
Well, let's kick this around. Wasn't FDR really in cahoots with Churchill the entire time? I mean, we were supplying money, as much resources. I mean, we even had guys over there fighting in the Battle of Britain.
Oh,
we had the Flying Tigers cooking. Like, we were doing
Against
everything but
Japan.
fighting the war.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing everything except fighting the war against Germany and Japan already. So to some extent,
sounds like Ukraine.
Right?
Oh, it was
Vietnam.
It was.
Yeah.
We had Lend-Lease going big time with England.
And in some ways, Japan just sort of formalized it with this attack. Like, it was no secret that we were in conflict with Japan. And reading his speech there, it's like, it's sort of disingenuous to say that we didn't think that Japan would ever do anything. I mean, we had all sorts of reasons to think they would, and we were fighting Japan,
right?
With our flying tiger. It's like there was stuff going on.
Right.
That
which was a pre-CIA operation. It was an OSS operation.
Yeah, and so the
Flying Tigers.
FDR wanted that war, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
I mean, the world was in huge conflict. The United States needed to be involved. I think we were still gun shy from World War I,
Right.
and we were isolationists. and we
Still
were
a lot of
reeling from the
isolationists,
Depression, and it's like we don't need this crap.
Little
We got our
Columbus
own
history.
problems.
So Claire Chennault, who headed up the Flying Tigers, right?
I thought it was John Wayne
So he headed up the Flying
and
Tigers.
Patricia O'Neill,
and
or Patricia Neal.
And then when the attack on Pearl Harbor happened, they dissolved the Flying Tigers, and those guys were impressed into either the Army or the Marines.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, they had a choice because the CIA, the OSS at the time, it was called the Office of Special Services,
Yeah.
and then that became the CIA. They dissolved that operation because, heck, now we're in open conflict.
Yeah, we don't need it.
So they turned that unit into an Army Air Corps, unit.
But the coolest airplanes of the war.
The P-47 or P-40
P-40 Warhawk.
with their shark's teeth on it.
It wasn't the most impressive maneuverable plane. I think it was sort of slow and cumbersome, but a really cool looking.
They were cool looking though. Yeah,
So that Claire Chennault, a lot of people. So he maintained his CIA status during the war. He was a general, but then after the war, he went right back to being a spook. And they operated down at Rickenbacker as Air America during Vietnam War and Korea and all that. Yeah, little Columbus tie-in there.
All right. Well, with that, we can segue right into Common Sense Ohio.
So, guys, I think we got to talk about this bombshell that went off on December 7th of a different kind. The Hunter Biden.
Yeah, been indicted.
Indicted 9 counts of tax evasion. And all of this was supposed to be swept under the rug by that plea agreement that was rejected in D.C. by that judge, Chutkan or something like that. Her last name. She's the hero in this, along with the 2 IRS whistleblowers that brought all this out in public, and she basically told Abby Lowell, Hunter's attorneys, and David Weiss, the special counsel, no, I can't approve this plea agreement.
So let's talk about what happens from here. He's been indicted, and there's lots of skepticism about this indictment because on the one hand, it's sort of it looks like there's some vindication for those who thought that he should be charged. On the other hand, what's really going to happen with it, and is it more of just a fall guy type of indictment? In other words, we can just do this, and then it'll lay the whole matter to rest.
Right.
I always try to put myself in this situation. If I got a call from the average guy who's been indicted on 9 counts of tax evasion and failing to file returns and et cetera, usually what the government wants to know is where the hell's the money? What's the flow of the money? Because whenever there's this kind of tax evasion, it's usually to shelter criminal money. You're not only making the money and not filing taxes, but something else is going on. Where's the money going? Where did it end up? And I'll be very curious to see if anybody really cares, like who truly cares where the money went. Because if they really want to follow the where it all ended up, I'm guessing it ends up in Biden's hand, Joe Biden's hands, Daddy's hands, in some way, shape, or form. You get some benefit from it, either improvements here or funding for something or a house or who knows what. But I've read some books and I've read some articles on this, and there's a pretty solid argument that that's what was going on. And I'll be curious to see if the government really wants to know this, because then they would engage in proffers and an investigation into this. Or is it just going to get whitewashed? He pleads guilty, gets his probation, and that's that. Now, the average Joe is not getting probation for this, I don't think. I mean, this is a prison case.
Yeah, from what I'm seeing, special counsel David Weiss says he spent millions of dollars on an extravagant lifestyle.
Right. They're calling it like hookers, drugs, and partying.
So
human trafficking. I guess even some of the hookers were trafficked young women. So you wonder, he might be getting into some human rights stuff.
Yeah,
here.
I don't know. So look, I'm not going to discount human trafficking that it happens, but it's that term I think it tends to get overused. I mean, are the hookers actually kidnapped and trafficked, or were they just hookers?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But look, you would want to explore all that.
Oh yeah.
You would want to proffer this, get him at a table and say, what did you do? Where did the money go? Right. Tell us about Burisma. Tell us about these links to China. Tell us about all this stuff. Because look, it's not just that this guy didn't file tax returns based on income. The income was premised upon like our enemies giving him money.
Yeah, clearly,
like China giving him money,
clearly to influence
Joe. And why did Burisma put him on the board to begin with to earn all this money?
Exactly.
And it's not a secret here. So if they really want to dig into this, or is it just going to be a tax case? So. We'll find out.
So there were negotiations with Abby Lowell to have Hunter testify in front of Congress.
Well, I think that's the other thing.
I think that's gone now.
Well, he's going to take the fifth.
He's going to, because there's a continuing legal.
But look, let's don't overplay that card either, because he still could have taken the fifth.
That's right.
Whether he's charged or not.
That's right.
If Hunter Biden calls me and says, hey, I need a criminal defense lawyer, I've been subpoenaed for Congress, and they want me to come offer testimony under oath about income I earned in Burisma and China and how it all happened.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, well, did you pay tax on any of that money? Well, like, all right, you're not going to testify. You're going to take the fifth.
Yeah. The one interesting thing a week ago, I think it was, that Comer, the other guy that's really in Congress, Congressman Comer from Kentucky, that's kind of leading the investigation into impeachment. He produced a series of wires from the Chinese communists that had the beneficiary address for the wires as Joe Biden's house, not Hunter's. So, I mean, I think we're getting into some nitty gritty here now.
It just depends on what they're going to do. I mean, look, this is a segue, an open door, if you will, to go investigate this stuff. To investigate the source of the money. Like, why, pray tell, would anybody think that Hunter Biden is worth all this money to pay?
Yeah,
it's like it certainly doesn't appear that he has the skill set. That would warrant millions of dollars funneling into his bank accounts, whether he paid tax on it or not. So you've got the pay to play problem, and then you've got the notion of where the money went. And it didn't all go to hookers, drugs, and partying. There's going to be money going elsewhere, and they're going to actually find it, or are they not going to find it?
Yeah. I mean, right? His computer that was found, the hard drive, says he had to pay his dad a certain percentage of these wires.
His dad was part of breakfast meetings. His dad was part of his dad
golf tournaments.
There's a book on this I just read, and it's like he was part of all of this.
Yeah.
And it's not.
And he's denied ever meeting any of Hunter's business.
It's all BS.
I mean,
just lies, flat out lies. Flat out pay to play lies.
Yeah.
Yep. And look, it doesn't even have to be that Joe Biden sold influence, although it's ironic that he fired the prosecutor who was investigating Burisma at the time his son was involved.
Leveraged U.S. tax dollars.
Right. And bragged about it.
To get Ukraine's own inspector general fired, who was looking into all this. But
leave that aside for a second. Even if the appearance that could happen, I think is abhorrent enough. So if I'm the president, my son is out there saying, well, look, you can, if you pay me all this, or like hinting around that since my dad's the president, that you might get some play out of this, and he's collecting money on it, and dad knows.
Right.
I think there's an obligation there.
And I think this also
To lay that to
explains
rest.
why Obama did not support Biden for president, because he knew he was
Snake in the
he knew he
grass,
was
yeah.
dirty,
Well,
and
that's
he's
a
like,
good point.
I really prefer Hillary. It's just,
Well, and imagine I always try to flip these things, whether I'm coming at it from the left or if I'm coming at the right, or we take a common sense look at it. What would anybody say? Not just the Republicans, not just the Democrats, and the media. What would they say if it were Trump and his
God.
son?
Oh, come on.
What
Yeah.
would they say?
Oh, yeah,
Like, how important would that influence peddling be then?
exactly.
Right.
Right. Because they had to make it up.
It would be off that they had to make it up.
They had
right.
to make up out of
the
whole
Russia
cloth the whole
collusion,
Russian
right.
collusion thing
Right.
that Trump was interested in hotels or something over there. And
Right.
it was all bull crap. It was all
Yeah, it was
just
all nonsense.
all nonsense.
Fabricated by Hillary's campaign.
And they created almost item by item what happened in reality with the Bidens. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, they tried to construct.
Well, while Biden was vice president. Right?
Well, yeah.
It wasn't just about the election. I mean, it was like he was
Yeah.
vice president.
I mean, if they ever could get Obama to tell us what he knew and when he knew it,
Obama ain't talking. I can tell you.
well,
that.
I think he knew, and that's why he did not back Biden and tried to talk him out of running.
Yeah,
Can you imagine if they subpoena Obama on this?
well, that'd be an interesting, wouldn't it?
Wouldn't it?
Yeah. I wonder what the executive privilege will look like at that point.
I don't think
Yeah.
Obama would lie to protect Biden at this point.
I think he would, because
You think so?
yeah, I think he would, because he's not just protecting Biden; he's protecting himself. Because
Well,
if he
that's
knew
a
this
good
stuff is
point.
going
True.
on, and he
Good
doesn't
point.
stop it, he's the president.
Yeah.
You're right.
True.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
So he's got to take the fifth, or lie
Wow.
if he knew. I mean, who knows what he knew? But
Yeah.
there was all sorts of stuff going on. So yeah, I mean, if it were reversed and Trump and Trump Jr.,
We'd be hearing about this 24/7.
it would be the
That's all people
That
would be
daily
doing.
anal
bombshell,
probe. Oh, yeah.
the bombshell every morning on Facebook.
Oh,
bombshell,
gosh, yeah.
bombshell.
Well, and we
bombshell.
saw what Fancy Nancy did with Trump.
Fancy Nancy.
She got him impeached. She got that second impeachment vote with absolutely no investigation or anything after January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and this was after he was out of office.
Yeah.
They impeached, which is why John Roberts, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, did not preside over the impeachment vote. He didn't even go down there because it was absurd.
Mm-hmm.
You're impeaching a guy who's out of office? Like he said at the time, what is the point of this? You're going to throw a guy who's out of office out of office?
Right.
That's like,
Right. Yeah. Oh, my
So at
God.
least the Republicans this past week, you got to give Speaker Johnson credit. They called for a vote whether or not to continue the investigation into impeachment. So it's not a vote to impeach Biden, but what they did this week was basically pass authorization, which Jordan said constitutionally is not required, but they didn't want to do what Nancy did. They didn't want to just rush to an impeachment. They actually want to pass a piece of legislation that says we're going to officially investigate this.
Meanwhile, this week we had the latest Republican debate, which again, I didn't even know there was a debate. It's like that's how insignificant it seems.
Oh,
now.
you going to the budget? Yeah, because there was a big news. The Republicans capitulated again.
Yeah,
on-
well,
on-
no.
on
I
the
was
bu-
talking about the actual candidates for Republican, the
Oh, the
Republican candidates
debate
for presidents.
Republican debate.
The
Yeah.
debate, right.
So
right,
we've
right.
got, along these lines, you've got these like Pelosi going after Trump. And I'll tie all this together in a second. So if you look, did anybody watch Bill Burr on Jimmy Kimmel?
Yes.
So Bill Burr just tees off on Jimmy Kimmel.
On Kimmel, yeah. Called him an idiot.
Called him an idiot and say, you Democrats, you're going after Trump. Like you've basically created a martyr out of him, and
Yes.
you've kept him alive and all this stuff. And Kimmel's like, well, what if we wouldn't have? And Bill Burr basically says, because of you guys going after him, literally from the grave or when he's in the
Right.
grave, like you've given him second life. And so we have this Republican debate where Trump is the leading candidate by a huge measure. He's not even on the stage.
40%
And he's-
above Haley.
And he's not even on the podium debating
So
anybody.
they're debating to become vice president,
Right,
basically.
right.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
maybe not even that. I
great.
think
Maybe not, yeah.
I think people say hands down DeSantis won. DeSantis there's something about him that people don't like, whatever that is. But at least he's got a true conservative ideology. But it's really all for naught.
Yeah.
Trump is going to get the nomination, and I can't even in my head fathom how this is all going to unfold.
So you know what it is that people don't like about DeSantis? He's just not entertaining. And I think American culture has gotten to the point.
More of an operations guy.
Well, we elect people like Bill Clinton, right? He was entertaining.
Yeah, lots of charisma.
Lots of
Obama, lots of charisma.
And he had this crazy
Trump,
past.
lots of charisma.
Smoked pot, had all the hot chicks, a little side affair, and all this, in the big drama. I'm not Tammy Wynette standing by my man. I'm not making cookie. He had the spurned wife. And America just loves that kind of stuff. It was like Jerry Springer.
Well, it was like the dawn of reality TV and all this stuff was going on.
And then we elect the guy who says you're fired, right? The apprentice guy. And it just goes to show you, I don't know if you go back to Ronald Reagan or where you go with this, but it seems like, and then Jesse Ventura gets elected governor of Minnesota. I mean, it's like we've become a celebrity, like politics is celebrity melded together.
I think that mark in time is probably about right about Reagan. Because if you think about it, because my mind's going to media is cultivating this.
I think you're right.
And media became much more up front in the 80s.
Yes.
If you think about it, because, let's go.
Started to become ubiquitous.
Back.
CNN, C-SPAN.
Exactly.
Reagan had that weekly.
Let's go prior to Reagan.
General
those
Electric.
presidents weren't that much of a personality, a cult of personality.
Well, nobody ever heard Lincoln talk unless you went to a debate.
Right.
Or you might go back to maybe the dawn of it was the Kennedy-Nixon debate.
Yeah,
was the first one that was televised.
Sure.
But it
had its moments in time.
But it wasn't like this ubiquitous media
Constant.
all the time,
Right.
Exactly.
all the time, crawling up their backside. But even after Kennedy, the media knew enough to not crawl up his backside about all the affairs and all the crazy stuff he was doing.
And they played up the PT 109 thing.
Right. So the media
which was
propped him up.
Let's face it, he effed up. He had his boat cut in half by a Japanese cruiser.
Right. And look, you can't blame him. I mean, I get it. It's like everybody makes mistakes, but they made him a war hero.
Yeah, they were gonna court-martial him.
Yeah.
But it's
and FDR jumped in and said, "No, you can't do this to Joe's son." I mean,
and you can't. They laid off him when he was like having obvious affairs in the White House.
Right.
I mean, and then Bill Clinton comes along, and it's all there.
That's all there is.
That's all there is. And America's scooping it up.
Yeah.
The public opinion was not to impeach him. The Republican House, that was an extreme thing for them to do.
They got the Republicans got way out over their skis on that one.
Way out over the skis because people did not look at it as a civil rights violation of Paula Jones's, because he lied in a deposition. So, American people didn't look at that like that. They just thought the Republicans are mad because he had sex outside of marriage.
It wasn't the issue itself.
Yeah.
But they just loved Bill Clinton.
They did.
So if Donald Trump did the same thing, he would be skewered for it. If Donald Trump did what Biden did and his son did, he'd be skewered for it. It's really about where the popularity contest, who's winning the popularity contest.
Who gets what pass.
And really, it's more about left and right. I hate to say it, but
it kind of is, though, if you think about it.
The Dems control the media, and at least they did back in those days for sure.
Yeah.
Now shows like ours and other sort of alternative sources are coming through where that was a huge threat. And I think that's in large part why Trump gets elected. There was like these alternative media sources that sort of have been growing, and now it's dangerous. And maybe this ties in a little bit to why the government is so interested in censorship of social media and controlling these messages.
Boy, and Elon really blew that up a year ago. I mean.
Well, last week at the conference, did you hear him talk? Well, I think we talked about this last week.
Yeah, but the idea that Twitter is now an open platform once again.
Well, that's right.
Is gigantic.
It's gigantic. So Trump wins the election, I think, because of social media, and in large part because of social media.
Yes.
He, like Kennedy years before, realized that that's a huge, powerful weapon that you can wield in your campaign. And Kennedy did that with the TV. He looked good. He was smooth.
Yeah.
And there's Nixon on stage sweating like a racehorse. And it's like it was all those things were sort of tied into Kennedy. Like he took advantage of that, and Trump did the same thing.
Sure.
Social media, Like he understood the power of that in
Steve,
a common guy who was involved in that.
There are so many other examples of this too. Schwarzenegger becoming a 2-term governor of California. You've got Clint Eastwood, even was mayor of Monterey, I think it was, and so there were a lot of people, a lot of celebrities. I think Matthew McConaughey is talking about running for governor of Texas.
Yeah, but he's screwing up. He's like his message on guns is bad.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like Brett said.
Reagan. All right, let's talk about Reagan.
The
real quick.
melding of celebrity culture with politics is now so firmly established that
I mean, Reagan, an actor, becomes president,
and that GE theater that
that's right.
Every week into Americans' homes about the beauty of America and American history, and he would tell a story.
And he just had that delivery.
Yeah, he did.
Right. He had the voice.
That was Grandpa on the camera.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that fireside chat feel.
It
did. I remember that.
It harkens back to exactly.
It just does.
The fireside chat.
So I think the first party that sort of finds that candidate is going to win. And I don't think it's Trump anymore, and it's certainly not Biden.
So in my opinion,
it's not DeSantis.
The reason DeSantis is, if we were 100 years ago and DeSantis was running against Abe Lincoln, like he'd have a chance because you'd look at his policies in the newspaper and you'd just read about him. But on stage, he's just boring. I mean, he's just because he's a policy wonk guy,
and his voice sounds sort of whiny.
Yeah,
at times, and I don't think he is whining, but it's like it's all that delivery.
Exactly right. Yeah.
It's all that delivery. So an actor could do a phenomenal job, but it's all bullshit.
That's right.
DeSantis does a phenomenal job, but he can't act it.
Well said.
And that's
that's
sad. Who wins and loses because of that, though.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy.
You should charge $1,000 an hour to be a political consultant.
He's your COO. He's your chief operations officer. He gets things done, and he does it efficiently. And his instinct is great. Just look at Florida. His debate against what's his name, Gavin Newsom. He just dismantled Newsom.
He dismantled him,
and he didn't do it because he's a great orator. He did it because his policies were good and Newsom's were bad.
Yeah.
By the way, I talked to your father-in-law, Gavin. I mean, that was a beautiful. I mean, he had so many little beautiful moves. They were great, And Gavin was just there with his hair gel and the great smile of his, and he's just bullcrapping his way through the whole thing.
Total BS. Everything he said was BS.
It was all BS. I think we need to also talk about this latest Republican Congress reaction to the testimony up on the Hill by the Ivy League presidents about their hate speech codes. Now, I hate speech codes, right? So,
we should talk about that. Why do you hate hate speech codes?
Well, if you're going to have a hate speech code, apply it,
But a hate speech code
evenly.
Implicitly is censorship.
Yes, it is.
Implicitly.
Right.
By its very nature, it's Orwellian censorship.
Totally against hate speech codes. But when the Ivy League presidents, MIT, Harvard, and UPenn, when they go up on the Hill and they say, we have a hate speech code, and we apply that against like the Klan and neo-Nazis, and basically, if they say something about black fraternity sisters, that they're buffaloes, we'll close down those fraternities. We'll drive those people off of campus. And I'm like, those are really ugly things. And I guess if you're going to have a hate speech code, please do me, even though I'm against the code, but at least do me the courtesy of applying it evenly. So when Hamas protesters get on campus and they say, kill all the Jews, they won't call that hate speech. And the reason is, according to the three people who testified, the presidents of these Ivy Leagues, they say because it hasn't been turned into action, we don't do anything until there's action. Well, wait a minute, that's not true. If you say something about women or blacks or other minorities, then you do take action. But curiously, when it's about Jews, You don't. And so the hypocrisy of that is
Well,
on full display.
It's inherently censorship, right?
Yes,
And content-based censorship.
that's right.
So hate speech is now judged by the eyes of the beholder on what is offensive and what isn't offensive.
Right.
And not even the eyes of the alleged victim to the offensive speech, but the beholder of the law. So if a university thinks, well, this is offensive to the Muslims, so that's going to be hate speech, but we agree that this isn't or that we agree with this content about the Jews, so that's not hate speech, and we're not going to enforce it that way.
Because that's what it comes off saying.
But it's right. Yeah.
It's exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's that same mindset of you're allowed to yell, or you can yell fire in a movie theater, but you will have repercussions for doing it.
Yeah, well, that's right. So
you let them speak, but there may be repercussions. But like you said, level playing field.
Yeah, a direct threat, like if you threaten the president, a direct threat on somebody's life is illegal, properly so.
Sure.
Okay. But so if you say, I'm for a genocide of all blacks or all Spanish people or all this or all that, or the Houthis and the Tutus.
that
or
is
whatever,
protected speech.
That's protected speech.
That's protected speech.
But somehow if you say,
look, kill all the Jews.
kill all the Jews
is protected speech.
It
kill
is.
all the Muslims
It
is
is.
protected
Yes,
speech.
it is. Right.
Put a menorah up. It's protected speech.
But if you say, I am going to take this gun down to the campus and shoot people, that's not protected speech.
well, it's
That's
different.
a direct threat.
If it's a direct threat, you can regulate that
That's
and you
right.
can act on it.
You can act
but voicing political positions is the very heart of free speech.
Right.
Political free speech has to be open and it can't be censored.
And if you don't let it be open, guess where it goes? As we talked about before, it goes in the dark.
It goes in the
and
dark.
we never hear it, and it gets. And then we're
Where
we're
the bacteria
surprised.
grows, right.
Yeah. Then we're
So-
surprised that something happens bad because we didn't let them speak it out in the open.
So the hypocrisy of these speech codes is being brought out now. And I think the UPenn president, her board, or his, I forget if it's a man or woman, but the president of UPenn, based on the testimony this past week, is getting fired because the board at Penn is like, well, wait a minute. If we're going to have a speech code, which we all three think there shouldn't even be one, but if we're going to have one, you have to apply it equally. If you call for a genocide of one group of people and that's bad and you get kicked off of campus, or you're as a student you're told you can't matriculate here and you're kicked out, but other genocides, it's okay to promote those. Well, wait a minute.
Right. So the hallmark, a couple things we should talk about. First of all, if we're talking about private campuses, so private universities, it's a different standard, right? So
Right.
the
Like
standard,
Harvard's private.
Like Harvard's private.
Sure.
So when we're talking about freedom of speech, we have to identify we're talking about government action that would hinder your right or that would somehow censor your speech. So the government can't act. A private person, in theory, can. Now,
Yeah.
there might be some private causes of action that you have or civil actions, but it's not the First Amendment.
Right.
So when the government acts and censors speech, now we have a First Amendment problem. So that's government action. And so when we're talking about these private universities and we're having hearings on it, it's just, I think they're just trying to bring topics to the forefront for discussion.
Yeah.
But when they're talking about the government acting to limit free speech on, say, public university campuses like at Ohio State or somewhere else,
Michigan.
now we have a problem. Now we have a First Amendment problem. And sooner or later, that's going to sort of matriculate up to the U.S. Supreme Court on some of these issues, and they're going to have to do something about it.
Yeah.
True.
Similar situation in testimony by this lady who runs, it's an abortion organization, but they call themselves a National Women's Law Center. And she got herself into a problem with Stefanik, Elena, is it Elena Stefanik, Congresswoman from New York, who asked her 10 times, 10 different ways, could not get her to answer why men, she basically took the Ketanji Jackson Brown defense and said, I'm not a scientist. I can't decide what a woman and a man are. And basically this was about women in sports Riley Gaines is sitting right next to this lady at the table before Congress. And this lady from the National Women's Law Center is saying that there is a whole range of genders. It's not just two. And that, it's a spectrum, right? And that to admit men can't play in women's sports is to somehow admit that men are predominantly stronger, more physically capable in the sporting realm. And she just wasn't going to go there. So, it just brought out in very clear terms with her testimony that they're insane. I mean, they're just they're just. I mean,
I thought there was going to be some
you got a female congressman asking another female, "What is a woman?" and she's basically saying, "I don't know. I'm not a scientist."
Yeah, it's.
But I look at myself in the mirror naked every morning, and I can't tell.
You had the National Women's Law Center, so now you represent men, I guess.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's just utter insanity. Wow. It's just utter, complete insanity.
Yeah, I was I'm a judge for this organization to listen to podcasts and listen to content, holistically, sound and that sort of thing. But there's one. It was a DEI podcast. I forget the name of it. Doesn't matter. But the guest is a well-known author in that world of DEI and was talking about her son. And she made the comment that, well, my son, well, at least that's what he calls himself right now, 6-year-old.
Wow.
My 6-year-old son, I should say what he is right now. And I'm thinking about what. Okay, so she says that. Yeah. So where is her mind? So is her mind that she's open to maybe her son might change? Okay.
He's
or is she predominantly thinking, I am going to help him make sure that he has all the opportunities and choices because I'm just such a DEI person. I have to be the forefront.
I'm going to go a different direction completely.
I don't know.
It is nothing more than a virtue signaling cry about how awesome I am because I buy into this.
That was
BS.
Another piece of it. Yeah.
So it's like, well, I don't know what he is yet. Of course you do. He's got a little penis.
I just
honest to God.
He's got a little penis.
Go back to his birth certificate and see what the doctor wrote.
He's a
there.
freaking boy. But instead they play along with the charade that the emperor actually has clothes on. And the problem with that is that eventually you're teaching that to the next generation. Look, we all know we have inherent common sense, but you're teaching your next generation to ignore your common sense and instead follow this doctrine of ideals. Yeah. And remember, I think we talked about this once before. It's like you've got this, instead of figuring stuff out and using your common sense and doing it the hard way, people just ascribe to some set of values that go along with the political position.
Yes.
And I think this is happening on both sides, unfortunately, but particularly on the left, it's like, you have to believe that boys can be girls and girls can be boys, that gender is fluid. You have to believe that. Check. You have to believe in,
abortion. I mean, they have a whole list.
You have to believe that it's a fetus, not a real baby, even though you can see it with a 3D ultrasound that it's clearly a small little baby in there, but it's just a fetus and you can kill it because it's not really a human. You check, and look, I don't care if you actually believe those things, but at least give it a fair shake. Be able to articulate the position instead of just checking boxes. And it sounds like this person is just checking a diversity, equity, and inclusion box by saying, well, my son, but we don't know what he is yet. Of course you fucking know what he is. He's a boy.
Well, and just how she said it, too, is like my son. It's like she backpedaled very quickly.
Right, because she is
whoa.
Tipping the hat.
At least for now or whatever.
Wave the virtue flag.
It just really hit me. And I even spoke out loud at the car stereo. I went, what? Whoa.
Right, it's stupid.
At least
it is stupid.
Are you directing his life? Are you going to let his life happen? It's like, I feel bad for the 6-year-old son, quite frankly.
And it's sort of devastatingly worse because it's not that I don't think she actually believes this. I really don't, in her heart of hearts. But she says that she does, and she's going to act as if she does. And that means that she's not going to raise her kid in a way that he should be raised. And, so if you tell your son he can be a girl, well, guess what? Don't be surprised when he thinks he's a girl.
Right.
don't be surprised.
Right, because you're conditioning.
If you tell your kid
Yes.
he can
it's
fly,
it's
and he can-
psychological conditioning.
yeah, if you tell your kid he can fly and jump off the top of the house,
Well,
he'll do it.
Right. Let's even be more realistic.
Because he loves his mother and he trusts his
Right.
mother.
Yeah.
So let's say the 6-year-old boy and the dads that are overpowering and wants our kids to play sports and wants to be that football hero. It's like, and you keep telling your kid, yeah, you're going to be great in football. You're going to be great in football. You're raising this unrealistic standard.
Yeah, you can go too far the other way.
So,
for sure.
so it's the same.
It's the same.
It's the same thing.
It
Yeah,
is.
the healthy families are in the middle,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
They're not
Look,
extreme.
there are boundaries.
Yeah.
Here's what you can do, kid.
Right.
And if you cross this line,
Right.
there's a problem.
Right.
And
right.
you
Whatever
know-
that is.
Right.
At different ages, those are different things.
Right. And it's and
Like you're not walking out in the street and playing
and you're missing this fantastic journey watching your kids grow up.
and learn it on their own within
And
the
learn it-
boundaries that you've created. Right.
It's just it's a great journey.
So as a father of two boys, I mean, I raised my sons to have deep respect for the opposite sex, right? You open doors, never hit a girl or a woman. No physical violence of any kind, no implied violence, no threats. You're to treat women with the utmost of respect, even more so than men, right? So all those same things are true about men, but I emphasized, in the culture of my household, that women were to get a little bit more,
You're raising women up
special
on a little
treatment.
higher pedestal, right?
That's right.
So, and this is the criticism. There's been backlash against this. This is chivalry, basically, is what
which
you're
is
teaching.
terrible that there's backlash.
And it's
right?
not to say that women are less capable. It's they're more deserving. It's like if you treat them with if this kind of respect as a man, you're showing them that there is something about you as a man. It's not them as a woman. And it's
Right.
it's totally misinterpreted.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
The other way. And it's I was raised that way.
Yeah.
My grandmother, I remember one of my first dates, she said, "You be sure to open up the door for her."
Right.
And I
Right.
did.
Yeah.
And she said, "Make sure you clean the car up before you pick up that girl."
And by the way, you're paying for the date. By the way.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
That's right. So, Mom, can I have money so I can pay for this date? Yes. It's like,
Right.
and that's
You show up at prom, you've got flowers in your hand, you've got a,
now
little
once you
brooch.
marry him, you can do whatever you want.
Jeez. Wow. But see, that would tend to lead to, in general, not every case, of course, because we're at 50% divorced, but, in traditional society, the deference that you gave women often led to a more, healthy household,
Stable
household.
Stable household.
Right.
It's not that you're relegating women to a certain role. It's that you respect that role even more.
Right.
It's like because guys can't do it.
Yeah, they're
Not
the
as
life.
well.
They're the life givers.
Not
they're,
as well.
They're the ones that bear the children for 9 months. That So you look at women as so special in that regard, and for women to throw that away, it blows.
Well,
me
not
away.
only that, and
It
fight
blows me
back,
away.
and instead of like they fight back, and they're going to say, "Well, if men can do it, we can do it." But then they typically they're choosing like the worst part of manhood.
Yeah.
The kind that go out and philander around and
Exactly.
and
we have
and
this
cheat
spate
and
of-
drink and party and have sex with whoever they want.
And we
It's
have this
those
spate
are the
of-
worst qualities of
Right.
manhood.
Yes.
And we have
Because
women.
we don't advocate those qualities.
No,
of men.
of course not.
You know,
Right.
I mean,
Well, and we have
Yeah.
we now have a lot of young women. There's this weird cultural thing that's going on with teachers. I guess you've seen it in the news, where like they're behaving like cads, like the men used to, trying to be predators on young boys now. And you're like, why are they imitating
It's the worst
awful
form of,
male
like,
behavior?
They're choosing the worst male behavior to imitate because the best male behavior is
Would never do that.
the best male behavior respects them as a woman who they
Right.
are, right? So you
Right.
can't somehow there's a juxtaposition there.
We had Sergeant Steve in here, and he said one of the best things he ever did was be a volunteer coach for a girls' high school basketball team, right? Well, now you're a creep if you want to do that. Like, you're immediately under suspicion.
Yeah, it's
It's terrible what's happened.
we are in bizarro land.
We're in bizarro
Nothing makes
land.
sense anymore.
No. Funny thing. So Mayor Ginther here, mayor of Columbus, Ohio, they outlawed menthol cigarettes, which I didn't know this. This is how dumb I am, but I didn't know menthol cigarettes were predominantly being consumed by blacks.
I saw that too, and I didn't realize
Didn't
that
know
either.
that. I just
traditionally, I mean, that was always.
I just didn't know that.
Yeah, I just
either.
didn't know that. Not being a smoker, I didn't know that.
didn't know
Like
that.
Cools and menthol flavored.
Somehow that became part of black culture.
Yeah.
but Camels became part of white culture. You know, it's like
Yeah,
it doesn't.
I don't know why, but it's funny.
I think Camels became a thing. Of white
Yeah,
culture.
well, I think. Well, they
Marlboro Man, especially. You know,
The Marlboro Man, right? Marlboro,
Oh man,
Marlboro Reds.
Yeah.
Well, they would stick camels into going back to World War II, right? You know, they put them into sea rats. You know, but what's kind of funny is the Biden Health and Human Services was going to have a regulation they were promulgating to ban flavors in cigarettes federally, right? So they were going to do federally what Ginther and his gang have done here in Columbus. And they decided, probably wisely, especially with their reelection coming up, that, maybe our idea of protecting African-American communities from menthol cigarettes, comes from some good part of our heart that we want to prevent cancer in that population. But we're really going to piss off a bunch of black smokers.
Well, look,
because
you're
it
taking away something that I
You're
love.
too dumb to choose
You're
what
too-
you.
that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
You're
That's the
too dumb.
message.
We need
Right.
need to take care of you, and that's been that attitude.
That's right.
Going back to LBJ, right? That's that attitude.
They call it the plantation attitude.
Yeah,
right?
it's just like we know better for you.
Right.
And that's how it is.
You're too dumb
We're
to
gonna
make this
step back
decision.
and we're going to help you. And we knew it's like screw off.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Look, I know what to smoke if I want to smoke. Just leave me
Right.
alone.
So somebody, I guess, in the Biden campaign probably told the Biden White House, "Yeah, you don't want to do this, right?"
Bad message.
Yeah,
Bad
yeah,
message.
yeah.
Probably,
Exactly.
probably a bad
I mean,
idea.
how patronizing and condescending is that? really,
Right.
at its core.
I wanted to give a shout out to Senator Rand Paul, I should say. So I'm going to go back on my soapbox. I mean, I've talked about this a little bit, that, my history in this journey has been radio. I've been in radio before going into podcasting for like over 30 years. So just this past week, Senator Ted Cruz, Edward Markey, and Ben Ray Lujan, I'm going to say that's how you pronounce his name, he's from a Democrat from New Mexico, went to the Senate floor this week seeking to pass a bipartisan, bicameral AM radio for every vehicle act.
Oh yeah, we talked about this a couple weeks ago.
So they rushed her on the floor. This bill which was approved by the Senate Commerce Committee earlier this year, was on the verge of Senate passage before being objected by solely by Senator Rand Paul. So this is a quote from Senator Cruz. AM radio is something that is widely enjoyed by Americans across this country. Over 80 million Americans listen to AM radio every month. They rely on it. And he says, if you're going to piss my people off in Texas, I mean, this is huge. I mean, this is something we got to do.
Can't they just go buy an AM radio?
Yeah. So they're saying, the car manufacturers are saying we can't, AM radio is just not working in our cars now because of all the electrical stuff, that sort of thing. And there were 5 or 6 manufacturers saying we're just going to eliminate AM radio completely. Well, that's where the NAB, National Association of Broadcasters, got in saying, whoa, you're going to kill the AM industry. Well, Cruz was on, I'm just glad that Senator Rand Paul was the lone going, no, we're not going to do this. Cruz then called for the bill to be passed by unanimous consent, a process in which it only takes the objection of one senator for the request to be rejected. That objection came from Senator Paul, who during his floor time argued that this isn't the government's role to mandate what technology automakers include in their vehicles.
Good for him.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so historically...
And you're coming at this from somebody who, in theory, your history is support radio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, okay, so granted, if we three get in our cars and tune in an AM radio station, it sounds like shit.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
I'm not going to choose to listen to an AM station. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm just not going to. That ship has sailed. Back in the 80s, we had the opportunity to implement, and I'm glad it didn't happen. It was back down to we chose. It was 2 AM stereo systems. And the government said, the FCC said, we'll let the buyers decide.
Let the market figure it out.
And it died.
Yeah.
So it didn't happen. If you listen to an AM station, let's just say across Ohio, I guarantee there is very little local programming on that station.
Yeah.
Very little.
Yeah, AM radio is
There's more
it's a
local
dinosaur.
There's more local programming on the local FM stations than there is on an AM station because it's all syndicated. It's syndicated.
classic government intervention based upon lobbying groups and money. So
And politics.
and yet another administrative agency cramming down rules on people.
Conservative radio's largely on AM.
But mostly,
and look,
but at least at least
it's-
at least the
You
center
can
of
just hear it
the
in the background, like you go into a weird jewelry,
This is
jewelry store.
This
I've been
is
into, and you can just
targeted
hear it
in
the
some
background.
ways. This whole battle is targeted against conservative radio.
A little bit, but you did have both sides of the aisle. Everybody was saying yes to this, though. But I think for the wrong reasons. I agree with Senator
inherently.
Paul that's like, yes, government stay the hell out of this.
Yeah, that's
If
a
a manufacturer does not want to put an AM
If
radio
enough
receiver,
consumers tell Ford Motor Company, "I want AM radio,"
They'll get it.
They're going to
Put it back in.
They'll put it
Or
back
guess
in.
what? Now we have an opportunity. So if somebody wants to develop a little modular device that you can sell,
Yep.
that you can stick on your dashboard,
Right.
that will get AM reception,
Right.
well, then go make $1 million
and
doing
maybe
that.
pick it up better.
Maybe pick it up better. Right.
Like Spotify does, right?
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
Make it like XF. Remember those
Yeah.
devices weren't in
Right.
cars yet, so they sold that separately. All right,
Yeah.
we'll just do that.
Well, and you know, this whole legislation is way past the party anyway.
or can I
because-
get AM radio on my phone?
No. Well, you can. You could stream it.
I
You
can
could
stream
stream
it,
through
yeah. So
an
that'll
app.
be
Yeah,
the
you
next
can.
thing that happens.
You can get it. Yeah. I mean, that's party in regards to this whole mindset of that we got to control that entertainment dash is long gone. Oh my!
Or-
for the past 10 years, that dash has turned into a streaming dash.
But
that
good for Rand Paul
Oh, for sure.
to
yeah.
recognize that it's not the specific thing that you're trying to regulate, whether you agree with that or not. It's the lever of power you're exercising by implementing that regulation. So when the government takes a lever of power and forces a private industry to do something, it's bad.
Yes.
And it shows you
It's fascism.
it's a window into how Rand Paul calculates things.
He's a classic libertarian.
Because he knows AM radio is where a large part of his base is supporting him.
Yet he is voting
Yet
against
he's
that.
voting against compelling
because
AM
his,
radio.
because his belief structure is such that
Let the market decide.
government is way out of bounds trying to regulate that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, that was.
It's a
good for
beautiful
him.
example.
I think it is.
It's
I
a
think
beautiful
it's,
example
you know,
of
those
standing by your
bubbling under.
principles rather than doing what's politically expedient.
Right. Exactly. But anyway, yep.
Well, it's a paradox for free speech, right? So
Yeah.
what you have is
Yeah.
like you have to permit the speech even though you disagree with it.
That's
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
And he has to vote no to that even though he agrees with the ultimate outcome.
I'm sure he does. But,
Or the ultimate outcome might benefit him.
right. Right.
Well, this feeds into a story. It's somewhat about automotive surveillance. You know, like Tesla Model 3s have 8 external cameras and a mobile eye, an interior camera that watches the driver and the occupants and then transmits all this data back home to the mothership for all kinds of marketing and supposed
thanks.
research.
That was the quote. I know he was interviewed a while back.
And this is all.
Because it's not about manufacturing a car. It's about the information taken from the
Big
car
time.
to
Yeah.
market. That's what it's all about.
So traffic cameras now are back on, you know, we thought we beat those back with the ACLU, believe it or not, 20 years ago. Now robocams are wanting to come back because they're saying the old arguments about you couldn't identify who the driver was, you know, well, that's being taken care of because now we have cameras in the car. So it tattles on the driver.
Yeah.
And we're like,
Dismantle
not
it.
only should we ticket people that are speeding that we can detect with robocams, but we should also introduce technology into the cars just to not let them speed.
Well, here's look. Having
So when you put
practiced-
your foot down, it only goes to 55 or whatever the speed limit is on that road and no higher.
as somebody who's practiced criminal defense for almost 30 years now, 29 years, it's dawned on me. I don't know where in my career I realized this, but we have the capacity in our society to eliminate all crime, or at least 99.999% of crime.
I remember you saying death penalty for everything.
It's really easy. You just put jackboots on the ground.
Yeah.
You put a guy with a machine gun on every single corner who is employed by the government to stop every single criminal action. And when they do catch criminal action, you execute the person on the spot. Right. You would eliminate all crime except for the government's crime.
Right.
Except for the government's crime. You could have a completely safe society except for that little twist that the government could be corrupt. And soon they're going to turn those guns on you, the innocent person, to implement their ideals.
Right.
And that's what happened that's what Stalin did. That's what Hitler did. That's what Mussolini did. And that's what will happen if we permit this. You've got to check this stuff incrementally. Otherwise, you're going to wake up one day and Big Brother's watching.
It's a pathway. And the other thing that's happening that's driving this is the Minority Report, or what they call predictive policing thing. That movie, that had
Tom Cruise.
And I forget who wrote the book. Was it the same guy who wrote
sort of this dystopian?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that the Japanese government and the Chinese communist governments have both rolled this out, and the Chi-Coms are actually pushing the technology globally to they're selling this technology to other countries. They're marketing the idea that you can monitor social media, you can put cameras up in public spaces and look at the number of times people blink or the way their eyes move or whatever, and you can know who's going to shoplift or murder or rape or whatever, or shoot President Abe, which they assassinated the former president of Japan. You can get ahead of the crime before it has occurred and go arrest that person.
Well, look, this is the same argument we make against.
Oh my God!
This is the same argument I make against communism and socialism. Like, let's presume that the person that you instill in that position to monitor these things is a saint, is maybe Christ himself, will never be corrupt, will always implement all of this with the utmost fairness. What about the guy next time?
Yeah,
right.
Because everybody's like, well, this is great. We could just stop all the crime. Yeah, except when the government gets corrupt. Right. Now they take that technology and they turn it against you in a corrupt way.
It's AI.
And if you don't think that could happen, then just look at how they're targeting. Look, there's political targets. Donald Trump is one of them. And, they're going to turn around and the Biden campaign is going to claim that he's a political target. The government wields its power against its rivals.
And if you can create technology to do this, all you're opening the door is to create technology that it goes against it. So if you're having something that monitors eye movement, let's put it that way, there's going to be something that comes out that you can buy that games the system. There always is. It doesn't matter what you do. There's always a game.
Well, fair enough, right? So it's never the perfect outcome that you think it's going to be, and it's not going to be implemented perfectly in the way that you think it's going to be. So everybody's like, well, look, I don't do anything wrong. The police should be able to come into my house and search all day long they want.
That's a classic
reaction.
Yeah,
but what if the police are doing something wrong?
Right.
Yeah.
What if they drop an unmarked gun, on your carpet and say, "Oh, so you were the guy who robbed that bank?"
And go tell them, go find somebody or go find a society where you have zero government corruption and all the government actors do it perfectly.
Because the government
doesn't exist.
It's just people.
Right. The government's corrupt because people are corrupt, and people are corrupt because we were born with that awful thing that nobody wants to admit called original sin. If you think you can engineer a society that doesn't have it, well, good luck. It's never been done.
So months back, we talked about several examples on Chat GTP or whatever it's called, the AI, system, and we saw how biased it was. That if you told it to write a poem about, a good poem about how nice President Biden is, it would write a poem, and then you'd give it the same instruction and give it the name Donald Trump,
and it wouldn't do it,
and it would say, my programming will not allow me to write a poem. And these are actual examples, right?
Yeah. And
so the Japanese and the Chinese in using AI to predict who's going to be a criminal,
they're already baking in.
There's bias. We know AI is not an even-handed,
So what happens when you implement this and there's more blacks or more whites getting accused of future crimes?
Because this is profiling.
Right. It's absolutely profiling.
This is profiling. This is what we all, everybody's like, well, Rudy, you can't do this, this shaking down of black youth, patting them down, looking for guns.
Right, the stop and frisk.
Because you're profiling. Well, what the hell is this?
It's profiling.
This is
sure
it.
It's profiling.
Right.
And look, if you don't think you're going to get disparate outcomes out of this, then you're sorely mistaken. So eventually this has to implode. Maybe that's what should happen.
The article said that one of the leading early researchers into this was the LAPD back in 2009, got like a $3 million federal grant, and Chief Bratton at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. They were the ones that pioneered this and had some success they claim, in stopping crime from happening, because they would identify certain neighborhoods, certain people, certain gangs, and then they would focus on them. And I'm like, okay, but that's what old gumshoe policing always was.
Mm-hmm.
And now you want a computer to do that. So I guess you can wash your hands of it and say, hey, we're not going after black youths. The computer is.
Yeah.
you know.
Or you're going to program it not to.
Or you're going to program it not to. You're going to look for old Nordic women.
So you can.
And you're going to stop them on airplanes and do a frisk.
Who's to say that profile does not exist as in the system?
You can have a checkpoint at every single intersection and eliminate drug trafficking. Right? All you have to do is suspend the Fourth Amendment, put jackboots on the ground, give everybody machine guns, and disarm the citizenship. You'll stop it.
You guys want to do some quick hits?
Let's do some quick hits. We got to wrap it up.
Yeah. So Biden this week did another $5 billion in student loan forgiveness, even though the Supreme Court said he couldn't do it. He's doing it anyway. Now $140 billion cumulative he's done so far. And his education secretary said, hey, we're just getting started. For anybody not making more than $125,000 a year that's carrying student debt, their target is to forgive $20,000 of what they owe.
$125,000 as an
if you're
income?
not making at least that, then we're going to dismiss $20,000.
What the hell?
I don't. Hey, this is where they're going.
Is this happening, or is it? Are they just like they're saying they're going to implement it?
We just had a Supreme Court decision that he didn't have the constitutional power to do this.
Well,
he's doing it anyway.
They enjoined the enforcement of it, right? So they didn't actually get to the merits of it yet.
Trump vice president pick, J.D. Vance's name is in the mix. Tucker Carlson, just throw that out there. They're being, and apparently it's Melania that's pushing Tucker. She wants Tucker. She wants the Don to pick Tucker. But J.D. Vance, hey, I think bringing Ohio in, J.D. Vance would be
historically, Ohio wins the White House.
That would be a big one. Federal judge, last thing I got. Federal judge Thomas Klee in West Virginia, district court judge, knocked down a West Virginia restriction on 18 to 21-year-olds not being allowed to buy handguns. He said there's nothing in the Constitution.
Yeah, this is one of those Bruin-related decisions.
And a Bruin-related decision. He says there's no contemporary history at the time of the Bill of Rights being adopted that said youths 18 to 21 were not allowed to buy guns.
Yeah, and in the meantime, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments recently on a case involving it was a challenge to the firearm disability that results from having a domestic violence or a domestic-related civil protection order. And the U.S. Supreme Court is going to issue a decision on this based on the new Bruin decision, whether or not it's okay if you have a civil domestic violence protection order against you. Is that regulatory scheme in the United States? So it's a federal law. Is that going to be constitutional under Bruin and the Second Amendment? All the people that watch this, all the commentators are saying that there's no way they're going to strike that down. The court is sort of telegraphed that it's not going to touch that one. So we shall see.
Wow.
Even though there is no historical precedent for restricting those who have civil protection orders for domestic violence from having firearms. So anyway.
Well, okay. I guess we can all go home.
This history, text, and tradition standard is the Wild West, man. We're still figuring it out.
It really is. I guess we can all go home and smoke a doobie. Ohio, it's 24 hours into its recreational marijuana.
I did notice a little bit of
a haze.
Calming.
Hey, man.
There you go. Well,
everything's cool.
You can't have the 12 plants. You can only have the 6 because the Huffman says 6 is enough. Thinking,
not for
prior
not
knowledge.
For me.
prior knowledge. How would you know 6 is enough? He just says He just says it so authoritatively. It's like, what the hell?
It's like when people tell me, "Oh, you don't need 5 guns."
Right.
Yeah, right.
Oh, thanks.
You don't need 12 plants.
Thanks. I didn't realize that until you just told me.
6 is fine. Yeah.
You just told me. All right. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up this riveting episode of Common Sense Ohio on December 8. Okay, dude.
Far out.
December 8, 2023, the day we declared war in 1941 against Japan. So yesterday we lived in infamy, and today we have declared war. Next week we will learn more about what happened on, well, I can't even do the math, December 15th.
See, Steve's been smoking.
I've been smoking too much. I haven't been sleeping enough. I work too much. Anyway, you can check out Common Sense Ohio at commonsenseohioshow.com, brought to you by Harper Plus Accounting, where we are coming at you right from the middle each and every week, at least until now.